Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight, we will continue our journey through the Tao Te Ching. We'll be starting with verse 42. And what we'll do first is each person will read their favorite translation of the Tao Te Ching of verse 42. And then we will go to Jason's translation. And Jason will have a brief commentary, and then we'll open it up for comments for everyone to make a comment on each verse as we work through verse 42, 43, 40, and hopefully 44. So with that, go ahead and type exclamation point or raise your hand in Zoom to read your favorite version. Peter.
This is by Jia Fu Fang and Jane English. The Tao begot one, one begot two, two begot three, and three begot the 10,000 things. The 10,000 things carry yin and embrace yang. They achieve harmony by combining these forces. Men hate to be orphaned, widowed, or worthless, but this is how kings and lords describe themselves. For one gains by losing and loses by gaining. What others teach, I also teach. That is, a violent man will die a violent death. This will be the essence of my teachings.
Thank you, Peter. So next up, I have Juan.
Okay, so translation by Professor Moss Roberts, stanza 42. The number one of the way was born, a duad from this monad formed. The duad next a triad made. The triad bred the myriad, each holding yang and held by yin, whose powers balance interaction, bring all 10,000 to fruition. By the names man most of all abhor, orphaned, wanting, destitute. Kings and lords make themselves known, for in this world, those who take less shall have more. Those given more shall have less. These words men have taught, and so shall I teach. Who live by might never do thy right. These my authority, my guiding light.
Thank you, Juan. Would anybody else like to read their favorite translation? If not, I'll actually go ahead and read the Stephen Mitchell, which seems to be a popular translation. The Tao gives birth to one, one gives birth to two, two gives birth to three, three gives birth to all things. All things have their backs to the female and stand facing the male. When male and female combine, all things achieve harmony. Ordinary men hate solitude, but the master makes use of it, embracing his aloneness, realizing he is one with the whole universe. So that is the Stephen Mitchell translation, and I don't see anybody else that would like to read their translation. So Jason, turn it over to you.
Ready to share your translation? So you want to read it or no?
What's that?
Yeah, since not many people are sharing theirs, so I volunteer mine. Tao gives rise to the one. The one begets the second. The two brings forth the third. From the three, all beings emerge. All beings bear yin on their back and embrace yang in front, and are infused with qi in between to achieve harmony. What elicits more disdain than being orphaned, lonely, and unworthy? Yet these are the very titles king and dukes adopt for themselves. Indeed, one gains by losing or loses by gaining. I echo the teachings of others. The violent one will not end in peace. I consider this as the foremost teaching. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. You know, right now we have Peggy went through almost the same experience as Amang and I went through. So we are here to compare notes. Okay, so I think that's my pleasure to have Peggy here, and eventually we find somebody with same interest, same mind, and put. I don't know. He probably put more effort. I don't know who put more, but we all put a lot of effort and to compare each other here. Okay, I will not use the word competition. That's definitely is not Taoism thinking, but we will compare, and then everybody will see a different kind of translation. And okay, so I'm going to share the Among and I's my translation here. So just let me. So you can see it, right? So, okay. So chapter 42. The Tao produces one. Okay, I put parentheses oneness, okay, because instead of number, or you want to call it monad, unity. Okay. One produces two. I put a parentheses, I assume it's yin and the yang. And the two produces three. And I put a parentheses, heaven, earth, and the people. This one is a little bit far-reaching, I think, because this concept doesn't come out. Well, I'm not sure it's come out during that time or not. But basics, heaven, earth, and the man, this concept is popular during the Han Dynasty, which is 300 years later. Okay, so three produces all things. The literal translation should be 10,000 things, 万物. Okay, and I try to make it consistent. I translate all 10,000 things as 万物, as all things. All things back in, embrace yang, and immerse qi in order to achieve harmony. So the words here I use is immerse. I will have more interpretation later about this, more explanation about this word. Here I translate to immerse. 冲, okay. This word actually means a teacup, okay, or wine cup, okay, without handle, the small thing. So if you look at the cup, it's empty inside. So the same word, 冲, or I think in chapter 45 or 44, it's empty. So sometimes I will translate this word as empty. But here, this word is used as a verb. So I think, that's my opinion, I think that means if you think about a cup, it's empty. If you use as a noun or use as an adjective, it's empty. But if you use this word as a verb, that means it's not amplified in English. I think it means make it empty to receive something. So these words become 冲, you can call it a flush, immerse, that means you to receive water. So I think the idea is to think about like yin and the yang, and the kind of like qi, which is like a cup, or they have inside the cup, you can mix together or immerse together to reach harmony. I think that's the concept here. The last two parts, I put the part 2 and the part 3. A lot of scholars consider these two are redundant because the part 2 definitely you see it in chapter 39. And the part 3, I think part 3 also show up in other place. I don't remember, but at least it the information, the content doesn't match to the first part. So one scholar, Chen Guying, okay, he in his version he will take out these two part, but since the most popular version still have these two, so I will keep it. So people avoid words like the lonely, the solitude, the incapable. But kings and the duke use this word to refer themselves. If that's the same sentence in chapter 39, okay, here we talk about 孤寡不古, okay, so that's kind of the bad word. 孤 means the orphan. Okay, here I translate as the lonely. 寡 means the widower. Okay, so I translate as the solitude. 不古, that's a strange word. 古 means grand, and I think this word 古, the grain, means growing the grain. So if you cannot grow the grain, Chinese was the farming agricultural state, right? So growing the grain is very important. So if you cannot grow the grain, you means you are not capable. So that's the way the duke or the lord will call themselves, kind of humbly call himself. In chapter 39, use this one as an example as everything high has the growth from lower. But here, it talk about the reason therefore things may appear damaging, but actually be beneficial. They may appear beneficial, but actually be damaging. So start to talking about if you are in a high position, you talk about in the use the lowly word to call you oneself. This kind of concept, kind of opposite side. Okay, part 3, what other people teach is what I'm teaching. The strong, rigid people usually don't die naturally. 不得其死, I think he implied. The Chinese word doesn't have naturally, but when I just have to assume, Taoism will assume you die naturally. So if you don't die naturally, it's terrible. Okay, that means you have accident, you don't live a full life. This is my principal teaching. The words also a little bit changed in Chinese, called 教父. Okay, it doesn't in modern language people may think it's a godfather, but actually it means 教 means teaching, 父 means father, and the teaching of father, I think it should means it's only happened once. And I don't see in other Chinese texts use this word. So I feel a little bit strange, but I have to translate. So I decided to translate as the principal teaching. This is my principal teaching. So that's the text of 42. Since Amang is not here, and then I will, do guys, Nick has a question on the text, right? Nick.
Yeah, thanks. Just want to comment on your translation.
Yeah, please.
This 复古.
Yeah, okay, go
That
ahead.
term was also used in the verse 39. And so the 古, I thought it meant the valley. It could mean the grain, but I thought it was used in the sense of valley. I just want to get your thought on that.
Yeah, okay. So I'd like to thank you to bring up this one, because a lot of interpreter, translator consider this word as valley. That's a the same pronunciation. So 不古 means not deep. I disagree on this concept. Okay, I just have to say I see this kind of comment. I disagree. I think that means growing grand, and I think in other texts, I think you know, gu and the gua is the common call for the self calling self for the Lord, but bugu is the call for the southern small state. So I think this words make sense. Use grand instead of valley. Okay, so that's my opinion. I don't think they have a consensus.
So yeah, next looks like we have Peter next.
This is the time to share thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So I suppose for me, when it comes down to the thing I want to stress in my interpretation is this idea of it's easy, I think, on some level to confuse the Tao with yin. The idea of yin producing that kind of silence, stillness, yielding, this heightened state, or whatever qualities you give to yin. That yang, loudness, coarseness, power, all these things are somehow to be rejected or gotten rid of. Where I think it is important here that the yin embraces the yang. And to me, it's that embrace verb and all the different ways that it can be related. All the different types of stimulation, externally and internally, allowed, because the whole yin can contain it all. And I think the more we settle into yin, the more we have room for all the different kinds of yang that exist from the senses, from the mind, from thoughts, feelings. All of it can not be rejected, nor is it of one becomes addicted to it. One allows for it. So I think it is easy for this kind of for people who think that the Tao is yin, they try to get to some kind of quietism, some type of stillness, and they try to stop internal motion. They try to stop motion itself. And to me, I think that is sort of getting in the way of allowing the harmony of the two to build, to enmesh with each other, to build relationship with each other that leads to harmony, rather than being a good and bad false dichotomy. For it is more a left and right, or a red and blue, as a way of relating with each other so that they become good friends, instead of an endless war of either preventing silence or trying to become always maintaining silence. I think it is of that relationship, that of getting out of black and white thinking in that kind of way, I think is important in reflecting on to achieving the harmony by combining the forces of both yin and yang. And I think the next verse in regards to orphan, widows, worthless, or of solitude is this idea of the way going about it is individual, and you have to leave the popular conceptions, the popular strategies and ideas that are around you, because the relationship of yin and yang within your very being, mind, or soul is always an individual one. And so it's always going to be a solitary journey in regards to looking at the exact context of within you that cannot apply to any kind of stereotype or generalization. So you're the only one who can tread that path of harmonizing how they relate within you as an individual. And I suppose a final thought is this idea of, by allowing things to move, to let going of sound, but also letting go of silence. It is this idea that we don't know if things are going to benefit us or detriment us. And when it comes down to these ever-changing states, that we ultimately don't know what's for our own good in relationship to the Tao. So I think that verse is trying to keep us an open mind about trying to too much control what occurs inside our mind and what doesn't. And
Thank you, Peter. Actually, Jason, do you want to comment on anything specifically, actually, maybe about the idea that the Tao being an individual journey?
Okay, yeah. Well, personally, I would say Tao is individual journey. Okay, that's just my personal opinion. So I basically have no comment on this. But I like to point out here is this chapter is only chapter in Tao Te Ching talking about yin and yang. Okay, so that's my opinion, and probably a lot of people disagree. Is Tao Te Ching doesn't have too much with yin and yang. Okay, that's just my opinion. Okay, the yin and yang is later time in the Neo Taoism movement. Okay, or Wang Bi start to put together. So everything kind of, I'm not saying that's wrong, but let's say the text only this part have yin and yang. Okay, and then you may say, okay, other places also talk about yin and yang. Yes, they may talk about yin, but there is no text say yin and yang in the text. That's the only one. I just like to point out. So
Okay. Thank you for that. So, I mean, really quickly, does that speak to more the idea then it's talking about complexity versus yin and yang?
I think the yin and yang is that time the tradition, okay, and then yin and yang is that time during that time has the tradition, but I don't see Tao is talking. Tao is at least let's assume there's one author who wrote this text. He probably not have too much or too strong the concept of yin and yang here. That's my point. And but I'm not saying my point, my opinion may not be the majority agreement. Okay, so that's I have to say. But I still think this way because just like I like to use the example, the Old Testament and New Testament. You can read Old Testament as the foretold Jesus to come, or you just read Old Testament as the Jewish religious text by itself. So I'm taking the later way. I read it as the Tao Te Ching itself. I try to reject the later interpretation. So
Thank you for that. Madeline.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Jason. Can you put the that first stanza back up on the screen? There we go. Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
So I liked that in the first line,
Yeah.
you made it so that it wasn't the numeral one, but the idea of oneness. And
Yeah.
that the Tao is, and I like this stanza in general because the Tao is the unknowable noumena behind the oneness. Okay, and then one produces two produces three. Did you put in the words yin and yang after the word two?
The text talk about yin and yang, right? Yeah, I put a parenthesis yin and yang. It doesn't in the text, right? So I put a parenthesis. Okay.
Yeah, see, I think if you took out that yin and yang and the heaven, earth, and people, the whole thing is obvious from the final line of the stanza. So in other words, two would be yin and yang.
I agree, you know.
And the three that are produced would be yin yang and the qi.
I'm not going to do further interpretation. Thank you for the suggestion. You know, I probably will this one, you know.
Yeah, I think it can be, I think it can be inferred from the final line, but maybe not.
Yeah, I think that depends really is I think the more important, just like in last Saturday, we read Feng Youlan's talking about the spirit of Chinese philosophy. A lot of things is just the suggestiveness, right? Not articulate. So let's keep it this way, you know, and then so we open the room. Everyone can have their own can have his or her own interpretation. So I think I would do. Thank you for the suggestion. Yeah.
David, you're next. Thank you, Madeline.
Great, yeah, very interesting, and that brings up the question of how using sparseness in the text lets it speak in its sort of own voice, and filling it in, it may actually limit certain things the text is putting forward itself. So the translation I was reading, I really liked what it sort of did after the mounting complexity going from Tao to Yin Yang, heaven, earth, people, and all things, which is now referring back to the whole collection. But all things is the apparent first reference, which attain their harmony when mingled in a balanced way. Now that could be, there's always a tension, the way yin yang represents a dynamic of poles. But you're not rejecting, as was already pointed out, Peter mentioned, we're not rejecting poles. We're seeing that the harmony can only come from a dynamic, and it's the question of the balance. So that is sort of stepping you all the way back. And I see this, I'll say it a different way. In a sense, 1, 2, and 3 are all in opposition to all. These are all opposite concepts, but this is showing us a path that if you travel backwards from the complexity to the simplicity, from all to the basics, back to the pure dynamic of opposition, back to the unity of it all, that's the path that takes you towards the Tao. And if you don't see the dynamic happening, you're missing half that story, right? So this is sort of maybe giving us a direction for meditation in order to see more deeply towards the ultimate reality. And I think that the way the entire thing is laid out, there's sort of two basic lessons. The going from 1, 2, 3 and all things, which have to have their harmony by being balanced properly. And then boom, second lesson, really almost like a break entirely. Men don't like to be called virtueless, unworthy, solitary, but this is what the sovereign would will themselves to be called. What's going on here? Well, the explanation again follows. Appearing damaged actually is part of maybe that's only the appearance, because there's actually something more sturdy or augmented. And appearing augmented is actually a diminishment of what may be the realness. If you're willing to appear humble, you're not overweening. So, you know, that's a sort of lesson about how obvious balance is. And it's about in life, men living in life. So that's a human lesson as opposed to a universal structural lesson. And the rest of this is, you know, other people teach, I teach. By the way, the violent will die an unnatural death. Last statement. That's my pretty much a form of all the teaching. What does this say? You can find your way back towards the truth, but don't forget this lesson about violence. You get to act, yin or yang. You get to choose in every case. You're going to go to the left or to the right. It's all out there as possible truth in your balance. But the one you choose, that's the world you make real. Your choices change the world. And if you make it violent, you know what you can expect? Plain as day. So I think it's sort of, that's a whole teaching. That's a whole way of teaching. That's a whole school of teaching. I love this one.
Yeah, great points as always, David. I mean, I do think you point out something that's really important, the idea of the going from the simple to the complex, or from the complex back to the simple, and that relationship. But what would you say then, given your comments, what would this maybe say about the idea of desire? our own person, how to manage desire.
We start with the complex as our common sense every day. That's what we have to get beyond. Our everyday is being hungry, getting pushed around, doing things we don't like. That's meaningless unless you see how it fits into the dynamic you're going to live. So yeah, we're pulled in opposite directions on every spectrum. Is that any answer?
It is. It is. And we can get into it a little bit more deeply later. Quan, you're next.
Okay, my comment is on the choice by Jason to translate Chong as immersion. I think it's very interesting because in Chinese, that word is incredibly polysemic, okay, because it can mean to rinse, to flush. That's why Jason chose immersion, but it also means to develop, to oppose, to collide with, to clash with. So I would say that the choice by Jason is interesting, but I want also to bring that if he chose, for example, Chong as meaning to collide with or to clash with, it could have meant not immersion and harmony, but rather opposition and harmony. Okay, because since it's the only chapter of the Tao Te Ching with the specific mention in the text of yang and yin, the traditional understanding of the Tai Chi Tu precisely is that there is a complementary opposition between yang and yin, and that complementary opposition would give birth to harmony, and that harmony would give birth to the 10,000 things. So I just want to stress that that word Chong once again show to what extent to translate Chinese is to translate poetry, because each word can have 10 meanings in English. But and each choice is not necessarily wrong. Okay, I would say that we can have 10 translation, and the 10 translation are all right, because it will focus on an aspect of the reality. So the only thing, you have to learn Chinese if you don't want to have 10 translations. So, and the other thing is maybe a question for me, because by reading this chapter, it's obvious that it referred to, and Jason know that Tai Chi, Sheng Liang Yi, Liang Yi, Sheng Si Xiang, and so on. Here, 1, 2 is clear, but 3, what would be 3? 3, is it the trigram, or what would be your interpretation of 3? Is it the trigram, or is it something else?
Let me okay. First, I don't know. You just say 3, right? But one thing we can think about is in most of the ancient culture, 3 sometimes means multitude, right? Means many, right? So it could be yin and the yin yang, this concept. Then you have yin and the yang. You have many, right? Just
okay.
That's one thing. And that's add no further. So definitely here has no 太极生两仪 two 两仪生四象 the four image, right? 四象 produce 8 trigram 八卦. Okay, so doesn't have this one, but you can connect together because like Neo-Confucianism, okay, 张载, okay, they can do it, but that's not the job I'm doing here. So that's my question to you, Kwang, about the translation about Chong. So how are you? I believe this Chong is the same use as in Chinese medicine, talking about 中气. Okay, so how are you going to translate 中气? This word 中, I believe they are the same meaning.
Yes, yes.
So what's your understanding of 中气?
I would translate that either developing qi or opposing qi, depending of the circumstance, because the qi is the energy circulating in the channels. So
developing.
yes,
Okay.
Yes, and the energy can be in opposition or in development, meaning in the same sense. Because you know that I'm not a Chinese doctor, but in the sense of traditional medicine, but I have some basic theoretical knowledge, because either the qi is in opposition to each other and it would give rise to disease, or the qis are all in harmony. Okay, so one of the possible meaning of chong is developing, meaning developing in the sense in the same direction, or in opposing direction. So once again, the polysemy of Chinese language, you need to have the context to know if it's opposing qi or developing in the same direction qi.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
But I don't want to be a pain in the, I don't want to be a pain in the neck, Jason. But when you say that, when you say that, you can say that three is the multitude. I agree with you. It's true that in Chinese, three can mean the multitude, but it would be in contradiction with that text, because after three, you have the triad, bread, the myriad, meaning the three will bring on the multitude. So it must mean something else, three here.
No, okay. Three means many, okay, multitude. Then all thing, that means everything you see in company.
Okay. Congratulations to you, Jason. You managed to get out of this problem easily with the multitude. Congratulations.
So next up we have PG. Did I say your name properly?
Yeah, that's right. A few comments. First, the original text 1, 2, 3 in Chinese, it can be quantity. It can also be the sequence. Now, if you treat that as a quantity, then one produce, the Tao produce one, one produce two, two produce three. The last three produce everything. The number wouldn't add up, right? So we will end up to have 6 rather than 3. So I think the using the sequence is more accurate. Well, it depends on the line. Second comment is what are the 3? What is the 1 and the 2 and 3? Indeed, this is very hard. Based on the original text itself, there is no enough information to make anyone to be certain. But to think that the 3 are the heaven, earth, and the people, obviously doesn't make sense when it's been used as creates all beings, everything, because it's not based on, all the beings are not based on people. Heaven and earth maybe, but not necessarily people to create everything else. So what are the 3? So there can be speculated. There are various thoughts about this. It could be the 1 is Taiji. 1 is actually the Tao itself. It's a manifesting Tao. It's the Tao in the state of being a mother to produce everything. Now, the 2nd and 3rd, it can be either yin and yang, or heaven and earth. Now, with that in mind, 3 produces all beings. These 3 can be Tao, heaven, and earth. It can also be Tao, yin, and yang. My preference goes to Tao and yin and yang, because these 3, Tao, yin, and yang, they are not actually individual beings, and yet they existed. All 3 of them existed in every being they created. So we understand now. In this book, indeed, only yin yang has been mentioned only once, and yet, to the same effect, the book mentioned many times, effectively, but not using the same word. For example, talking about a sage, or talking about anyone trying to be, enlightened, knowing talking about sage, the sage knows their masculine quality, but hold on to their feminine quality, or knowing their masculine, the side, but also stay on to the feminine, the quality. So it acknowledge this male, the masculine and the feminine, or yin and the yang, existed in everyone, in male and in female. So yin yang is existing in everything. It's not actually being, it's kind of the quality. Now, Madeline mentioned about 3 could be yin yang and qi based on the following line. I thought about that too. But the problem is, obviously, it doesn't make sense, particularly to the scientist. Qi here is the air or breathing, or breathe. And so it is not something that will create as the element to create the rest of the beings. So qi here is really is to emphasize the way to maintain the balance between yin and the yang dynamically. When there is too much yin, then through this breathing, through this the qi is really like a medium in between. Very important to keep yin yang apart. You don't want them together, clapping together like a magnetic, in the positive and the negative together. It no longer maintain the yin and the yang. It become one, a fusion. So that's not how all the being can keep transforming and being alive. It has to maintain this yin yang. And so the qi here is really to be filled in between. They emphasize the in between. So the yin in the back and the yang in the front, it is about that. It is about to have something in between to maintain this dynamic balance. Now when it comes down to all beings, I think that's the most accurate way to translate. 10,000 thing, or 10,000 is not a correct translation. Even the translator tried to be faithful, but it actually does not read the original text correctly. Let me explain to you why. In Chinese, the text does not give you the hint about plural or singular. And here, it's actually should be read as plural. So it is plural, is not just 10,000. It's 10,000s, it's S. Now, why use 10,000? Anyone know the Chinese character, they understand. At that time, at the time when Lao Tzu had written this text, the text, the character that existed that can describe the largest number is that 10,000 character. But the character itself is a plural. It means 10,000s of thousands things. So effectively, it means numerous, countless. So I think that the all beings is more accurate translation. Even one tried to be faithful, but if you say 10,000, it obviously means E1. It means the original text will be E1. So that's another comment I want to make. Now, there are someone mentioned about the original text, 不谷. 谷 can mean the grain, indeed, can be grain. But in the other verse, it's mentioned about the belly. And I would say 不谷 simply means unproductive. When with that in mind, really, it doesn't matter when you treat it as a grain or the belly. It simply say, unproductive, because it means unworthy. Someone cannot produce the grain or cannot hold the water, right? If you think about the valley is about store, as a reservoir of water. So in that case, really doesn't matter whether the lotus intention is a belly or the grain. Unproductive probably is more appropriate words. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So Paul, we'll go with you next. And if everybody keep their comments to about 2 to 4 minutes so that we can keep moving. Shrikant, I see you're here. So I will, if you wish to take over.
Sure, thanks. Okay,
Okay,
so it's going to be Paul, Mark, and Bill, right?
that is correct.
Very good. Okay, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. That mathematical discussion that PG started reminded me of something that wasn't my comment, but I'll briefly state it's kind of intriguing to explore for the mathematically inclined the Fibonacci sequence and that way it begins and how it explodes at 3, to the myriad, because you then get the bigger increases and it's just 0, 1, 1, 2, 3. So I just think that's kind of intriguing. But secondly, I am really struck by the importance of translation here related to that one line that says, this is the principal teaching. And then the line before, we have pretty vast disagreement about what the line before is. So I'd kind of like more insight into that. Like Jason put it as strong and rigid, for instance, but with no mention of violence. And someone else, David, I think, commented on how it is so important because it's referring to the downward path of violence. And there was another translation that looked completely differently at it. So can we make more sense of the line that this guy is claiming is the principal teaching of the Tao? Thanks.
Okay. Okay. That's okay. I thank you for asking this one because there's so many detail. Unless you ask, okay, I'm not going to explain because I will assume not everybody interested. Okay, so the words used, okay, 强梁. Okay, so in today's meaning, 强梁 could be mean the robber, okay, violent people. Okay, that's why some translation will put the violent on that. But if you dissect the word, okay, I will say 强 means strong, 梁 is a being, okay, hard. Okay, so I think here is not telling people don't be violent. I think it's telling people don't be strong and rigid. You should be tender, flexible. That's my opinion. So it depends on how you read, right? If you read these two words, 强梁 together, you mean the violent people, okay? But you read separate, 强 and 梁, okay? That means strong and rigid. Okay, so.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Mark, followed by Bill. Mark.
Thanks, Shrikant, Joseph. I was going to mention what PG had said, that the Tao is, in a sense, prior to being. I'm not sure that we had emphasized that enough, but I'm glad that he did. My question is about the relationship between yin and yang, because I heard David mentioned this is an opposition. Quan mentioned complementary opposition of some sort. And PG mentioned that we have to keep them separate. But if they all come from the Tao, and if everything does in the sense of a mother or whatever metaphor we want to use, they're not entirely separate. Isn't that the yin contains some yang, and the yang in yin also is part of what we have to deal with? So that was what I was hoping to get clarification on. And I would just also mention one other thing. Since Joseph, you asked about desire.
Yes.
Isn't there a line somewhere in the Tao Te Ching that caught in desire, you see only the manifestations? So that's going to be something that you don't want to be caught in, I believe.
Thank you, Mark. Your question was amazing. So let's go with Jason. Go ahead.
No, I don't.
You
Well,
don't comment on? Okay.
I don't want to, because that desire is a big issue. So let's hold this one. You know, at least for me, I would like, when we see the text, let's pay attention on that.
Okay. Okay. We'll come back.
Yes,
Mark, don't forget that question. Okay. Please keep bringing that up whenever it is appropriate. It's a great question. Thank you. Next up is going to be Bill, followed by Madeline, followed by PG. Bill.
Thanks. First, I simply must say that I am humbled to be in the same meeting with people who know so much about this text. And I've read it, but I don't know nearly as much as you experts here. I simply wanted to comment on what Pei Ji said about the Tao balancing the yin and the yang. Those are my words. They might not characterize exactly what he said, but I heard something like that. And I simply wanted to add that in the Kabbalistic Jewish meditation tradition, based on the tree of life, which is kind of like the chakra system, the tree of life is 10 energy centers in the body from the head to the toe. There's a right column and a left column and a center column that balances the energies of the right and left column. The right column, which is the 3 energy centers in the head, the shoulder, and the hip, are compassion, kindness, you know, you might say feminineness, trust, benevolence, beneficence, etc. The left column, the left hemisphere of the mind, the left shoulder, the left hip is discipline, line drawing, strictness, judgment, and the center column is the balance of the two, and the balance of those two energies in the headwork of thoughts of either kind, benevolent or judgment, in the heartwork of emotions, the balance of comfortable, warm and fuzzy emotions and more strict emotions or guilt, shame, or whatever. And then in the legwork, down, you know, the balance of the two energies in the hips between kind of go mode and doing good things for oneself and others versus kind of restraint of like slowing down, taking the foot off the gas pedal and putting on the brakes. And so this idea that there is a balancing force is present in this system that I'm talking about, as well as the Tao Te Ching. And my point is simply to say, the more different traditions independently of each other settle on the same conclusion about how body energy works, the more likely it is that body energy actually works that way. And the idea that it all comes from a single source seems to be coming through in what people are saying about the Tao Te Ching. It certainly all comes from a single source in the Kabbalistic tree of life meditation system as well. So if these are all like blueprints of body energy from different traditions, Kabbalistic or Tao Te Ching, fingers pointing at the moon, and the moon is the way the actual body and mind actually work, they're basically saying the same things, and it's the same blueprint. So thanks for listening, and I'll pass.
Wonderful. Great point, Bill. Thank you. Thank you. Next up is going to be Madeline, followed by Joe and Nick. Madeline.
Right. Thanks, Shrikant. I'll be brief. Jason, can you put the poem back up on the screen again? So while he's doing that, I was thinking about what Quan and Jason said about the word blending. If you can just go up a little bit, there we go. The word blending, it seems that it has the immerse or blend of chi. Another word might be the swirling chi, or the whirling chi, WHIRLING. or the swirl of chi, then I'm also thinking about the word eddies, EDDIES, the eddies of chi or the eddying chi, as opposed to the word whirlpool. There's some difference. People usually use them interchangeably. So I think any of those words might capture the sense of things coming together, but blended while in motion, sort of continual motion, as well as the possibility of conflict as when things come together in a river or a stream.
Yeah.
Then further down, the kings and dukes who say, oh, I'm lonely, solitary, incapable. It sounds a little bit like what we call a humble brag. In other words, I'm so far above everyone else that I am basically an orphan in the world. I have no peers.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Actually, that's exactly what they mean, that because you are, first, if you become a lord, for sure you are orphan because your father died. So, and the widow, the second was widow, okay, widower, okay, but well, they have so many wives, so I don't know how, but basically, it's no pair, okay, you are right. But I'd like to back to your comment on chong, this word. I kind of contemplating what Huang said about developing. So, but how you translate these words is so important because how do you translate this word will influence how you understand the whole meaning of 1, 2, 3, all beings, yin, yang, and the qi. So that becomes very difficult. And then my way of the translation, instead of going further to explain a metaphysical system, I tend to go back to the ancient times, the originality of the world. So that's the way I'm trying to do. But thank you, everyone. I believe if we have a chance to do the third round of translation, we may see something different.
Jason, if I may interrupt 2 seconds.
Go ahead.
Okay, a modern physicist, David Bohm, created a word that might be an answer, a possible answer, and that word is hollow movement. HOLOMOVEMENT, hollow movement, meaning the movement of everything, but in perfect harmony and complementarity. So Zhonghe might be translated by hollow movement, but that's a suggestion. And I want to say to Madeline, I think you penetrated deeply into Chinese culture since you understood that orphan mean the unique man in reality.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. We need to learn how to write Madeline in Chinese characters. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Nick. Joe.
So yeah, I mean, just basically just to build a little bit on my comment a little bit earlier with the idea of desire. I don't want to go too deeply into that, but I will mention that one of the things that we discussed in pretty great detail that first evening is what was the Tao about. And I think there is this element of humility that exists throughout the Tao. And this humility is essentially protects you against excessive desires. So that's how I would probably explain that, the idea that where our desires are bring greater complexity to our lives as well. And that's where I was talking about going from the complex to the simple, from the simple to the complex. There's another aspect of it I think that's very interesting to explore is the idea of understanding the interconnectedness of all things. Something that we've covered here as well is the art of war and understanding how strengths and weaknesses actually work together. is a very important strategy in the art of war. So it has an understanding of complexity that is actually important as well. And so the last thing I was going to maybe compliment or just comment on was basically, I really do think that actually Bill captured something very important. It was the idea of this idea of qi, where he's talking about maybe just how the energy flows throughout the body, how all those things that he noted so beautifully are actually, it's a life force that is kind of complementing each, it's kind of how the whole, our body, works together with its parts. So he talked about the different levels, the different parts of the body as well. So I think that that's actually a very interesting way, and I appreciated that contribution very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Last comment by Nick, and then we'll go to the next chapter, because we want to always do 2 chapters. We have passed the 1 hour. Jason, you had a comment. Go ahead.
Let me comment on Joe's comment first. Because Sringa, you talk about that's an important question about desire. So I'm not going to answer the question. I just want to make it clear, because in Dao De Jing use the word so-called yu a lot, but a lot of translation translate as desire. But my translation most translate as intention. So desire and intention are different. Okay, so really depend on how you read this Chinese text. So we will see when we face the word. Can
I ask you, does intention go against the natural flow of things?
Intention, in my understanding, more on purposefulness. Okay, you have some purpose on that. Okay, so that's my understanding. But of course, when we see the text, we can dissect the text, see how we are going to understand the text.
I'd like to explore that further. That's interesting.
Thank you. Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Just want to follow up on Paul's interesting question. When I read the Chinese original, I don't get a sense that the last phrase, it means to say this is the teaching of Dao De Jing. It's one of the important teaching, yes, here. But I don't get a sense that this is the teaching of Dao De Jing, the #1 takeaway. I don't get that. But the sentence before that, it's to me, it's kind of the same idea as the meek shall inherit the earth, but expressed in the opposite sentence. So that's a sense I get. But the more interesting is your reference to the arithmetic. I find that interesting. So here I want to make a point, because if you think about the Greeks, when they talk about arithmetics, #1, of course, is important. Oneness, yeah, and infinity, yeah, that's important. But in the middle, I think the Greeks thought that #2 is very important. Actually, #2 precedes the other numbers because it means multiplicity, plurality. But here, of course, Dao De Jing also has that. But more important is the Chinese thinking about the #3. Yeah, it's mentioned not just as one of the stop along the lines between the sequence between 1 to infinity, but 3 is a very important concept in the Chinese thinking, and obviously in Dao De Jing, which actually refers to the crowd. So 2 to the Chinese are not numerous enough, so they have to bring in the 3 in order to communicate that sense of multiplicity, while 2, it's tied to the yin-yang, the duality, but it's not regarded as numerous enough. Yeah.
So Nick, you are here. Okay? Just answer your first question. So how are you going to interpret if you don't see it's a principle teaching? So how are you going to understand the last 2 words, 教父?
Yeah, it is one of the important teachings, no doubt about it. But equally, there are other principal teachings throughout the text. So I'm just, I thought Paul was asking. I thought, Paul, correct me, that you meant to say that this is the number one teaching. I did not get that sense, but it's one of the many important principal teachings yet.
Thank you. It's just amazing. Jason, I mean, this is just incredible group of people we have here, and just the level of observations and questions and comments, just it's mind blowing. Next up is going to be Bill and Joe. Folks, just keep it very, very short so that we can go to the next one. Bill, go ahead.
Okay, just for clarity, I am on 42, the first part that begins with the Tao gave birth to the One, up through, quote, the violent do not die a natural death. Is it fair game for me to make a comment on that paragraph right now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so early in that paragraph, we've got, 1, 2, and 3, and then we've got this harmonization, harmonized by the breath energy of emptiness, okay? And so he's talking about body energy, for at least from one angle. And then down it says, things diminish and increase, they increase and diminish. Body energy is kind of like that in the sense like mercury in the column of a thermometer rising up and going down, okay? And once one learns to like watch it go up and down, it's got its own natural rhythms up and down, all kinds of body energy, emotions, body sensations, thought energy. It has its own speed and dynamic of going up and down. And I think that is what is meant by this quote, the violent do not die a natural death. Okay, on a literal level, that's referring to human beings who are violent and do not die a natural death. But on a metaphorical level, it's referring to the difference between letting body energy rise and fall naturally on its own natural, organic time frame versus trying to intervene in body energy to like stop it and change the way that it flows. And the advice seems to be, stop intervening in your body energy. Just learn how to channel it in a way where you're not fighting it. You're kind of just learning how to build aqueduct walls to channel it. And you'll see that it increases and decreases and decreases and increases. And, it has its own things. And the word death there, this is my final point, body energy emerges into awareness and then passes away from awareness. And in that sense, dies naturally. Okay, so I think at least on a metaphorical level, that's what he's talking about, and that's the teaching, is learning to get into a more harmonized relationship with one's body energy's risings and fallings. Okay, thanks for listening.
Thank you, Bill. On last, it's Joe, and then we will go to the next.
I just want to really quickly follow up on this distinction between intention and desire. Like, what's the actual words that are actually translated, and how do they actually, or how are they interchangeable throughout the Tao?
Yeah, you mean the Chinese word?
Yeah, because I'm just curious, because that's a really important distinction to be able to, when going.
Okay, I'm going to type here in the chat.
As to why some would actually translate it in tension and why some would that actually I'm more questioning as to why people would choose intention over desire or desire over intention.
Because my opinion, because too much Buddhism influence, because Buddhism will talk about desire a lot. And I don't see Taoism talking about desire. Okay. So just like my metaphor of Old Testament and New Testament, because right now we are doing Old Testament, so they don't know, all the prophet don't know Jesus coming. So there's no desire, only have intention. That's my thinking,
Thank you. All right. So folks, we are going to now go to number 43. And after we're done at 10 p.m. Eastern time, we're going to have, PG is going to talk about his approach to Taoism, what he has learned, something about that. And then we're going to have a conversation, about a 1-hour conversation on that after 43, after 10 o'clock. All right. So 43, if you'd like to read, go ahead and type an exclamation mark in chat. Just announce which translation you're reading, read the translation, no comments. We'll go through as many, and then we'll go to Jason. We'll start with Peter, followed by Joe. Peter.
This is again from Gia Fu Feng and Jane English. The softest thing in the universe overcomes the hardest thing in the universe. That without substance can enter where there is no room. Hence, I know the value of non-action. Teaching without words, works without doing, are understood by very few.
Thank you, Peter. Next up is Joe, followed by Kwan. Joe.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. So I will read the Stephen Mitchell translation. The gentlest thing in the world overcomes the hardest thing in the world. That which has no substance enters where there is no space. This shows the value of non-action, teaching without words, performing without actions. That is the master's way.
Thank you. Next up is Kwan.
Translation by Professor Moss Roberts, stanza 43. In this world below the sky, the gentle will outdo the strong, and the non-material are able to enter the impregnable. Thus I know for sure, the gains that underacting yields, but teaching by the word unspoken, in this world few can master. The gains that underacting yields, in this world few realize.
Thank you, Kwan. PG, could you go ahead and read your translation? You're on mute.
Sorry, here it is. The gentlest in the world can overcome the toughest. Non-being can traverse where there is no gap. Through this, I know the value of non-doing. Few things in the world are as advantageous as teaching without words and practicing non-doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason.
Okay, another short paragraph. Okay, so according to the teaching, the shorter of the text, the longer we will spend time to understand. Okay, so I think the text is very simple. Okay, so the world's softest can prevail over the world's hardest. 天下, okay, under the heavens, I translate as the world. I think 天下, the word means different kind of word. I think it means 天下 under the heavens means the political world. And when Laozi talking about heaven and earth, 天地, I also translate as kind of word, but nature, which means the nature world. So we have the two words, right? One is political world, the civil world. Another word is nature world. So I think that I try to keep consistent. The world's softest can prevail over the world hardest, 兼 hardest. Okay, so here the translation is a little bit, the way I do it, I just want to explain a little bit here. I translate it as soft, okay, and in 30, let me see, on 30, okay, chapter 40, okay, I translate it as tenderness. If you see the Chinese word 弱, chapter 40, we talk about 弱. I translate it as tenderness. The meaning, I imply tender as a young, youth, baby, this kind of tenderness, not really weak, because I will say weakness as a kind of sick, associated with sick, okay, sickness. That's my understanding, and that's why I choose this word. I don't expect everybody agree, but that's the way, the logic behind. So 柔 I translate as soft because versus opposite to hard, because soft also imply not the baby or the age, the young, the youth. I think the soft means flexible. Okay, so you are flexible instead of hard, which is rigid. So here it talk about the word soft can prevail over the word hardest. Most translation translate as overcome, which makes sense. But I try to stick with the word 持聘. Okay, if you know Chinese, you will see they all associates with horse. So that means if you put all these words together, that start to feel make sense, because this text is less metaphysical, more political. All right. So the words you talk about, the political word, the soft, the flexible, can prevail or be popular, okay, over the word hardest, richest, powerful, this kind of concept, okay? So really depend on how you choose the words, okay? If I choose this word, the whole scene will become more political than metaphysical. 无有入无间, non-being can penetrate, 入, okay, means enter. So the non-being can penetrate the seamless. Okay, so if you have no space, only non-being can enter. Doesn't matter how tight you are. Non-being, okay, what is non-being? That's your own interpretation. Can penetrate the seamless. Even you have the, if you want to think of military, okay, that's another way to think about it. By this I mean. By this, I know the benefit of 无为. Okay, I decide not to translate the 无为 as to any no action, non-action, whatever. I think this word is too high value, just like in Confucius' teaching of 仁, benevolence, or 孝, filial piety. I want to keep this word as the original sound. So you have its own noble state, okay, will not dilute by its facial meaning. Teaching of no word and the benefit of 无为 are rare in the world. So that's the very short paragraph here. So please comment.
Thank you, Jason. All right, folks. So now comments. We'll start with Peter, followed by Joe. Peter.
So to me, when it comes down to about as applicable, when it comes down to softness, a metaphor that I like is I spent many years of studying martial arts and starting off with hard arts and then moving to soft arts. And then I started learning how to play Wei Chi or Go. And it's still the same spirit, at least in my relationship to it. It's just getting more and more refined in relationship towards ability, towards adapting to listening and responding in a way that allows my nerves, ideally, to be able to be so engaged that my nerves then become exquisitely, potentially, hopefully sensitive in order to read and respond on that level. And to me, it is that deeper listening that allows me to then have my answer on that level. And goes to a more of a delicate engagement in relationship towards the puzzles that are always in front of me in regards to choice, in regards to action, to figure out what is my harmonious, let's say, relationship to the given moment. And it is from taking that engagement and making it not rigid, therein lies allows for the natural compulsion for movement to engage, to find a flow that allows the intrinsic power of engagement to find a way to find what is most pleasing, which I think leads to harmony.
Wonderful, fantastic comment. Thank you, Peter. Next up is Joe, followed by PJ and Kwan. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, this does get to the idea of gentleness and the idea of knowing when to say something and when not to. And this is kind of the concept of Wu Wei, to the idea is that, you know, when to act and when not to act, and that non-action is just as powerful as action. One of, you know, my favorite sayings is the idea is there's nothing more powerful than the unspoken word. And I find that to be very true. Sometimes we speak when we ought not. And I'm chief among the offenders in that sometimes. However, that being said, is that I think that I don't know, the subtleness, the ability to allow things to happen without having to interfere is the best way I can probably put it. This need to actually change the way things are is kind of what this is kind of saying, where this gentleness overcomes this this more, let's just say, yang way of approaching things, this more abrasive way. It's better to be adaptable than not to be.
Thank you, Joe. PJ, can you tell me how to pronounce your name again?
Peiqi. I think you know, we used to all sorts of dialect, so any pronunciation is fine.
Can you repeat it one more time, please?
Peiqi.
Peiqi. Okay, very good.
You see,
very good.
That's actually not a necessary. That's just to reflect one type of dialect, which is a Mandarin. If I was born in Shanghai, for people like my friends and family, they will call it slightly different. They say Beiji. So never worry about how it's pronounced.
Okay.
We used to that different dialect.
Okay, thank you. Please go on.
Yes, this is a short verse, and what I want to brought that attention is the analogy, the second line. Very interesting. The analogy about non-being traverses where there is no gap, or traverses where there is where it is seamless. Now, this is like a figurative language. This sort of analogy is to explain why non-doing or wu wei, why the wordless teaching is the best. Imagine, because the everything is interconnected. Everything plays a role in a cause, right? Everything is a cause of effects. So when we, instead of non-doing or wu wei, we're actively doing what we think is right. So by selective action, so the end result will neglect something we don't do, leave a gap. So why not using the wu wei, the non-doing, which will fill in any gap. There will be no gap left. Similarly, about the teaching, you know, the more words you utter and the more you confuse people, and yet still incomplete. And rather than let the listener to listen the words, understand the words through their intellect, make them to think, to use their awareness to understand fully. I think that's what the gap is about. So that's the idea, this analogy, try to demonstrate the why most effective is to do wu wei and the wordless teaching.
Thank you, Peiqi. Next up is Kwan, followed by Yulia. Kwan.
Yeah, the last words by PG is just perfect for the transition to my comment, the wordless teaching, and it's very difficult to hear that wordless teaching precisely, because the title of that chapter 43 that Jason rightly translated at the softest, then the two Chinese words are chu rao, meaning arriving at what I would call to the capacity of receiving from the universe. Okay, because rao can be rightly translated as soft, that's for sure, but it can also be translated as to yield, yielding, to give way to open oneself, to receive. And I would say that here it can be translated. I know that it would be accused of using Buddhist concept, but Chu Rao is to have the beginner's mind precisely. Okay, and having the beginner's mind to be capable to receive the speechless teaching precisely. And that's what I wanted to say. I stop here.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Kwan. Next up is Yulia.
Hi, this is in reference to what PG was saying, and I think Joe also. It's a really big thing in pedagogy to cede control sometimes and to leave space for the student to figure something out, as opposed to always be bombarding them with information. It can be very, very difficult to do that, but it's necessary.
Well, thank you. All right, Jason, you wanted to comment?
No, I think great. No, yeah, and then that's why Dao De Jing has only have 5,000 characters. So, and then one thing Amang and I were so proud is the translation we make. We try to minimize the English words we use. So make sure there's no more around 5,000 English words.
Right, following that same track, you reach the Tao and you have no word, nothing to describe it. So thank you. And I like your comment that, shorter it is, the longer we talk about it. Next up, and we're talking about the Tao. So all this talk is about the Tao. Next up is going to be Bill, followed by Mark. Bill.
Thank you. I read this paragraph as talking about states of consciousness. And the only thing I want to say is simply to put on the table the notion of absence, and in particular, the notion of absence of awareness as a way to understand non-being and non-action. So here's what I mean by that. One can spend years, decades, increasing awareness of thoughts and feelings as a journey that leads eventually to the point of changes in states of consciousness that allow reductions in awareness of thoughts and feelings, that enable entrance into a state of consciousness where one is only aware of what's happening right here, right now, in a non-worded way, where the wordy parts of the mind are not doing anything and one's not aware of them doing anything. Words are absent, either spoken or thought in the mind. They're absent. Certain kinds of body sensations are absent. Awareness of them is absent. Awareness of certain things in the environment is absent. One has a single pointed focus on what's happening right here, right now. It can be a very soft feeling state of consciousness in the body, but I simply wanted to point out that non-being and non-action can be interpreted through the lens of receding away from awareness of lots of other things that used to crowd the awareness. And I could see how someone would describe this state of consciousness where those things have receded away from awareness, the things that used to crowd awareness, where the state where the things have receded away from awareness. I could see how one would use the word non-being and non-action non-being to describe that state of consciousness. And then if one can bring that state of consciousness into activities like doing the dishes or taking out the trash or whatever, I could see how someone would use the word non-action, because it's really, yeah, I won't go on any further, but absence of awareness is the organizing principle behind what I'm describing here as a way of interpreting this text. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Bill. Next up is Mark, followed by David and Shrikant. Mark.
Oh, thanks. I think that Bill anticipated very much part of what I wanted to mention. That was that I had a kind of epiphany, Jason, when you read out your translation, as well as Peiji's translation. I think they both agreed on making the connection between non-being and non-action explicit, because that's not something that I had really thought about before. And so, is there an analogy between the action of Wu Wei and the non-being of the Tao?
Hey, Peiji, you want to answer this question? I think you probably.
Yes, thank you for the question. Absolutely, they are connected. To follow the Tao, the only thing you can do is Wu Wei, non-doing. Now let me explain a bit further. What is Tao? Tao is actually awareness within you. Now that awareness may be different from what you think. The awareness I'm talking about is a pure consciousness. It is always there. It is something will make you aware without your effort. You don't need to consume any energy. And this awareness knows everything, but only will tell you what you need to know. Now, we humans we sometimes ignore that awareness. We want to engage our intellect because we want to know more than what we need to know. Now, what Wu Wei is really about, the Wu Wei is really like a mindfulness. The non-action is really action in related to involving the mental effort. So non-action is really non-mental effort. What mental effort here is about analytical mind. Again, the mind, the definition of mind cannot be so varies by people to people. Here, mind here is about intellect, the analytical mind. It's in our brain. Now, our awareness is not to do with our brain. Awareness is always there. It will make us aware, like an instinct, like intuition. Those are, to me, the awareness encompasses all of them. And think about awareness is the Tao, and Tao is awareness. Obviously, not everybody understands awareness as such, because awareness self is really beyond words, and there are lots of arguments. So just keep in mind what I'm saying, what I imply. Yeah, so it is very much connected. Only by practicing non-doing or Wu Wei, you will follow the Tao. What it really means is by not engaging your intellect, you will pay attention to your awareness, or what you are aware will not be ignored. Now, let me give a bit of further, if you mind, or maybe I can talk about later.
Yeah, we can talk about it later,
yeah.
Pacey. We'll talk about it later. We'll have plenty of time after this. I want to make sure that everybody gets to put their 2 cents on the table. Next up is going to be David, followed by Shrikant. David.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of indicate one aspect of how these things that have been said play out, which we haven't explicitly brought up. I want to bring it up. We were talking about teaching and how space has to be left and how that's difficult. I think part of the thing I want to bring in is that when you're teaching, when you're delivering information, when you're doing that stuff, you're alone. So that's not allowing any room. You have, when you do allow room, when you're not doing, in any group. When you're not doing X and Y and Z, now it's open for other people to, you've yielded, you've given space to others to see, to be, and to do and act as X and Y and Z, or whatever they're going to find. So it's the same in dialogues and discussions, communication, pointing to things versus explaining something, and we would say to death. So there's no chi there. But silence isn't death. It leaves the opening. So contrast silence, which speaks.
Thank you, David. So I want to make one comment. I really love whenever Tao talks about water. Oh, Jason, you had a comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me talk this one. Look like we have no time to go to next chapter. Okay, but that's fine. We may finish earlier. First, I really thank you, everyone, and just like so I just want to tell us first. I want to tell a story. I forget the time. Quan probably remember. There's one in the spring and autumn time. There's one lord. Okay, he want to get a steed, a good horse. So he hire a person to commission him to get a good horse. So he find out, and then he find out they have the good horse, but it's already dead. So he spent 500 gold to buy that dead horse. So the lord are very angry. Said, I'm asking to buy a good horse. You buy a dead horse. But he said, you see, when everybody make fun of me, okay, spend 500 to buy a dead horse. If you have the living good horse, they will bring it to me, right? So it easily attract a lot of good horse. So that's why back to Shrinkan's comment. This meetup attract a lot of capable people because Shrinkan put a dead horse here. So talent people start to show up. Okay, Jason can do it, so I can do it. So that's bring up, So in the same way, I also benefit a lot because another thing I learned from everybody's comment, and then I really appreciate this opportunity, and I also know a lot of great people here. So and then I also observe the conversation. Look like we have more disagreement, okay, than agreement, but the overall environment is quite peaceful. Okay, so that's also to show everybody practice Tao here. One last thing is back to is that Mark's question, right, about the non-being and the Wu Wei. Okay, so I refer to Peggy to answer the question because I know his answer will be totally different, probably opposite than my answer. Okay, because he probably read this one. Forget about the whole text, but talk about this chapter. Okay, to me, this chapter is very political. So in my point of view, Mark probably asked a wrong question. He asked a metaphysical question, not a political question. That's why I asked Peggy to answer it, because I read this text as a political teaching, because the Lao Tzu is telling people, the audience is not you and me. The audience is the ruler. Okay, so I'm not saying you should not read it or your interpretation wrong. I say the original purpose, this one should be to the leader, to the Lord. So use the word 天下 under the heavens. That means the political word. Okay, the soft, he asked the Lord, the ruler should be soft, be flexible, so you can overcome the tough one, the strong one, the powerful one. Remember, he used the word, not use the word 持聘, the horse running. That's a very political word, warring, this kind of word, right? The horse running. So he's talking about this thing, and then talk about non-being, and can enter the seamless, the no gap, so you can penetrate anything, right? So they talk about the Wu Wei, the benefit of Wu Wei teaching without word, the benefit of Wu Wei, the world hardly have the people doing this. So in my interpretation, this text is completely political, okay, instead of metaphysical. Again, that's just my view. I put my role to limit it, very narrow, to what's the text show me. Okay, and I will then open the opportunity to everyone to go further interpretation. Abedit is not here. Be honest, I very much like she read the Christian interpretation of Dao De Jing, because I always pay attention on her read, because she stand on the other side of the Dao, just totally take the Christian point of view to interpret, and which is probably the purpose of we reading this one. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. So I will start my comments by talking about the kind of metaphysical and philosophical